Tonight we say a happy 244th birthday to our independence, but the document that helped forge our nation is going through some definitive changes in the midst of the nationwide racial conversation. Arlington is no different. In this edition of ACMi News, we recount recent passionate pleas for change in our society as we have reached a tipping point. But it's a surefire chance to confront and correct our racial differences. That may require understanding a history full of failures and astounding triumphs, both individually and as a society. And on this day of independence, we can celebrate our accomplishments and a willingness to change so that we can reach the point where all lives really matter.
From McLennan Park to Spy Pond, from Poets Corner to the Mystic River, we have Arlington covered. We're your neighbors, a friend you can turn to. This is ACMi News.
Good evening and welcome to this special July 4th holiday edition of ACMi News. I'm Jeff Barnes. 244 years ago, our founding fathers honored a document, the majority of which was penned by Thomas Jefferson, who would become, of course, our nation's third president. Now, in our Declaration of Independence, you'll find words many of us learned back in school. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, this year, possibly more than any other year in our history, we finally have reached a tipping point where many Americans realize that all men and women may be created equal, but they're certainly not treated equally. And the pursuit of happiness is a reality for some, a pipe dream for others. Now, the year 2020 clearly has changed us, and there's no going back to our pre-COVID way of life. Some things have been changed forever because of this coronavirus pandemic. And of course, after the tragic death of George Floyd at the hands of a Minneapolis police officer back on May the 25th, America now stands at the precipice of being changed from within forever. Tonight, as we celebrate our Declaration of Independence, we also see clarity in those monumental words written nearly 250 years ago. And as imperfect as all of us are, we hope to stick by those words with our minds and our hearts and make those words count. America and its freedoms are not easy. We're all learning that right now. Now, in early June, ACMi told you about hundreds of Arlington residents lining Mass Ave to remember the unjustifiable death of George Floyd. The ramifications of this brutality are still reaching all corners of the globe. It certainly has affected Arlington. The procession in Arlington Center between Broadway and Jason Streets was organized by the First Parish Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington, and it coincided with other marches in the greater Boston area.
We're at a place that people are recognizing the cumulative, and just important that it doesn't happen anymore to anyone. And I don't know that George Floyd, I think it was just that it was so, that we saw it, right? I think it was that we saw it, and we saw it in a way that people haven't seen before, or as many people haven't seen.
So my brother Greg, who's trying to talk to my other brother, is saying, you know, look, when you elevate above the words people use to describe their feelings, you must ask yourself a question. Do you want peace and love and joy in the world? Yes, we all do. Racial harmony must exist to achieve that. That's why everything we're going through right now is a healing process.
People attending this rally today, and indeed many people across the nation, believe that the best way now to move forward from this gross injustice is to fuel their resolve with optimism. We've all learned through our history that values change through generations that preach acceptance and outright reject the tenets of discrimination. Forceful but peaceful protests like this for George Floyd have a broad appeal and are built on years of progress and years of heartache.
I think the demonstrations and protests have been more interracial, and I think the young people are much more ahead of me when I was a young person. I think their understanding is deeper. I think their commitment is deep. I don't know if the word is deeper. They're organized, and they're really smart. I guess I have to hope, and I have to put my hope in them.
You know, the problem has been going on for a lot longer than the last couple weeks, and it's heartening to see this many people out, and I think it's important to keep showing up, and it's important to acknowledge that there's been a lot of people doing this work for a lot longer than this group of folks has been out marching. And so this is an amazing next step. And also we want to make sure we're honoring all the great activists who've come before us, including all the amazing people who started the Black Lives Matter movement and folks before them for the last 400 years.
Marchers here say by unifying in this fashion, true and resolute equality cannot slip through the cracks of time any longer. After 400 years of overt and institutionalized racism on these shores, it's finally time for true justice for all Americans. And that enough is enough. That march was only the beginning in Arlington. A Black Lives Matter banner still adorns Town Hall, this after the town issued a proclamation and declared a Black Lives Matter Day for next week, July 13th. The Select Board's proclamation and this banner, which will stay up at least through the end of this month, are Arlington's part of the worldwide movement condemning the death of George Floyd and condemning racist acts of oppression in all forms, including institutionalized racism.
I think it's good that they're showing support in this horrible, horrible situation. I mean, I'm sort of encouraged by the fact that it seems to have gone global at this point, rather than, than just the U.S.
I think that it's amazing. I think that it's so important that we show that we support the Black Lives Matter movement in Arlington.
Do you think that possibly, maybe, finally something good can come out of this?
I hope so. I hope that laws come to make it so that can't happen, and that the police officers are charged even more harshly, and that the police are trained more so that incidents like this don't happen again.
Just 2 days before this banner was put up, hundreds of residents were marching down Mass Ave to honor the legacy of George Floyd, the man who was killed in Minneapolis by a police officer, while 3 other officers just stood around and did nothing. That happened on May the 25th. Then on June the 12th, 27-year-old Rayshard Brooks was shot and killed as he was running away from police in a restaurant parking lot in Atlanta, Georgia. That city's police chief has since resigned. The officer involved in the shooting has been fired and the investigation continues. This banner is up here to remind us all of deaths like that, and also the unjustifiable murder of African Americans on these shores in the last 400 years. It's why hundreds of people took to the streets last week in silent protest in memory of George Floyd and the legacy he now leaves behind. Town manager Adam Chapdelaine weighed in. Arlington has a long history of being a welcoming and inclusive community, and this banner makes a statement of solidarity with the worldwide protests. It's a positive step and the start of a journey. We've begun a lot of work already, but the road ahead is longer, and we have a broad cross-section of people ready to do this work. ACMi News spoke to the newest member of the Select Board, Leonard Diggins, who last week was victorious on town election day. He admits there's a lot of work to be done by town leaders, and he readily admits residents also share a great deal of responsibility.
All these events have a way of getting replaced by the next big crisis. And so you never know what's going to come along, to blow something off the attention grid. And so the key, is for everyone, especially leaders, to know what the underlying issues are, and have a way of planning to deal with those once it's no longer the front burner. Because inevitably, this is not going to be the front burner. That's just fact. It's just a matter of time as to when it goes away. Now, I feel that the most important thing we can do is get people to get more engaged in the political process. And that means voting. It doesn't mean only voting in the presidential election. It means voting in state elections and smaller elections, and just being engaged in that way. And it's great that people have the energy to protest on a sustained basis, but they should also take that energy, especially organizers, and get people registered to vote. But not only that, but get them voting. Work on getting them voting. Because that's where the real power is in the democracy, is in the voting.
Arlington Police Chief Julie Flaherty says the town police force immediately has updated its so-called use of force policy, requiring officers to intervene in situations where another officer is using unreasonable force. She says the department's use of force policy is now fully aligned with what's known as 8 Can't Wait reforms, a campaign pushing for reforms such as banning chokeholds and strangleholds, requiring de-escalation, requiring officers to provide a verbal warning before shooting, exhausting all alternatives before shooting, implementing a duty to intervene, banning shooting at moving vehicles, requiring a use of force continuum, and requiring comprehensive reporting of all incidents that resulted in the threat or use of force. Arlington police have also updated policies to include a clear definition on its existing ban on neck restraints, as well as the requirements for officers to attempt to de-escalate any situation and give verbal warning before using force. According to the latest data from police, in 2019, Arlington's police force responded to nearly 28,000 calls for service. There were 0 complaints for use of excessive force, and there have been 0 such complaints so far in this year. Indeed, it was Chief Flaherty herself and Captain Richard Flynn of the Arlington Police Department directing traffic along Mass Ave so residents could honor the memory of George Floyd. If such actions and updated measures in community policing had been undertaken in the city of Minneapolis just 1 month ago, the tragedy that stunned the nation and the world may very well have been prevented. ACMi News also talked to the president of the Mystic Valley area branch of the NAACP, as all of us, of all races, try to hammer out solutions from the profound tragedies that we've all been exposed to in recent weeks. Where can we go from here? Where can we feel better about ourselves as a society and a culture, in your opinion?
Well, Jeff, I think we've reached a boiling point that we're finally demanding a solution. Like, we want to see changes. Like, we don't want to see another Trayvon Martin or Freddie Gray or George Floyd. We don't want to keep seeing this. We want to see changes to the system, which is police brutality, police having too much power, and just police officers not being held accountable. So legislation being passed and just a cultural shift. Like, this is what we want to see.
I remember Rodney King, and then, as you say, Freddie Gray, Eric Gardner in New York.
Very similar. Yeah.
George Floyd was a game changer. It was a game changer. And what, in your opinion, what caused that? Had it been bubbling up for so long, just underneath the surface, or what changed this time around?
I think it's several factors. I think one of them is just, it's been a lot of things happening, and at the same time, like Ahmaud Arbery a few weeks before already had people feeling really hot. I think it's the coronavirus pandemic. People have been trapped at home. People were like boiling under, kind of like, Romeo and Juliet. Like, it was really hot, and people got aggravated, and then everyone wanted to fight. So I think all those factors led into it. And then the actual video itself of being almost 9 minutes long, and the complete, dehumanization of a man on national TV, like, crying out for his mother. Like, I think that really got to a lot of people and hit people, like, right in the heart.
What do you think could be done as far as police are concerned? I've noticed that in many instances, I worked in Baltimore for 20 years. About 15% of the police force in Baltimore lived in the city of Baltimore. Most lived in the suburbs. And what I could never get was, how can a police force that's paid to protect a certain community do its job if it doesn't know the community that well? Because a lot of people from the force don't live there.
Well, I think that's one issue, but at the same time, I think the whole issue is just general accountability. Like, we could bring in officers from, upstate New York and Pennsylvania, bring them to Baltimore, but if they're not going to be held accountable for their actions, whether they're from Baltimore or not, doesn't really make a difference. Like, you could be from the same street and terrorizing the same street you grew up on. You just have to be held liable if you're going to go rogue and do something that's not in the best interest of the community.
There's a great saying out there, and for white people, I think it's worth looking into. I'll never understand, but I stand. And I think that's a great saying. So how do we seek solutions now? How do we find the solution so that we can move on? This is a very painful period we're all going through right now, of all races. But maybe there's some good that can come out of this. What are the solutions in that you're thinking about?
Well, one solution is two of our congresswomen, Catherine Clark and Ayanna Pressley, she's the lead on it, have this great bill they're trying to push through Congress now. So we would like to see something like that. We'd like to see, the qualified immunity be attacked. We'd like to see, the cultural shift. Like, there's a lot of great police officers, a lot of great police chiefs that some of them have said, I can't even get rid of bad cops if I wanted to because the police union is so strong and it prevents this. So we need that to change. I don't know if it's getting rid of the union completely, whether it's, getting brand new jury members. Like, I feel like everyone will be better off once those things go into effect, and all the good police officers will be able to better do their job without having really a target on their back from people hating police, from not trusting police. At the same point, each individual district and department will have credibility in the communities if everyone knows they're not going to tolerate, people going rogue and misbehaving.
What's the NAACP doing right now? What are you hearing from the NAACP? We hear from Black Lives Matter. We hear from other activist organizations. The NAACP has been around for a long time. What are they doing about what has happened in the last 20 plus days?
So we're doing a lot of pushing legislation. So from the national NAACP, which, we have the lawyers and everything, we're trying to push those new legislation through, whether it's the ban on knee and chokeholds, whether it's the getting rid of qualified immunity, whether it's the citizen review board. So we're doing a lot of the legislative pushing. Like Black Lives Matter and NAACP are very different groups. So Black Lives Matter they have a lot more younger members. They're going to do a lot more of the rallying, a lot more of the marches. NAACP is more, the political aspect of it.
In late June, a peaceful protest was held outside Town Hall Saturday, June the 20th. A lineup of speakers talked about their experience in the public school system and how they've been dealing with racism their entire lives. Black student leaders at Arlington High School held a protest in front of Town Hall, which drew a crowd of more than 300 in the sweltering summer heat.
We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree planted by the water.
But few were thinking about the hot summer temperatures. This was a 3-hour peaceful protest to address what they call systemic racism within the Arlington public school system.
We need to decolonize the history system. We need to learn more about Black history. Everyone should know more than just who Martin Luther King is, that slavery existed. It goes back so much more than that. Our school system needs to touch on who Marcus Garvey was, who Medgar Evers was, who other people was. The civil rights system in particular was bigger than Dr. Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. It was so many more individuals.
And they were remembering the countless African-American victims whose lives were cut short because of blatant ignorance, brutality, inhumanity. Freddie Gray, Eric Gardner, Trayvon Martin, George Floyd.
Today is the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. There is an eclipse tonight. And you stand here where? In Arlington, Massachusetts. Arlington? That's what I said when I got the call. Arlington? We stand in Arlington, Massachusetts. You are here to lend your support. You are here to stomp out systemic racism. You are here. And we thank you for being here. Give yourselves a hand for being here.
There were a lineup of speakers attesting to their own and sometimes hurtful experiences, just trying to find their way through everyday life.
I want us to make sure that this is clear before we continue on with today's events. Our purpose of standing out here on this hot day is not to condemn or call out certain individuals or systems within Arlington Public Schools. Everyone and everything has room for growth. By standing here today, we want to address these issues and work towards something better, and in doing so, we need the help of all of you. Thank you. Now's not the time for it to become a black and white issue, but it's an issue for everyone to come together on. It's no longer that Black people, because it involves them, they should be the only ones fighting. We need our white allies because they are people who can easily reach government. They have sometimes they have higher standings, or the standings that they have can help us and help us achieve our goals.
So this is just kind of breaking point almost of George Floyd, him saying he can't breathe, him calling for his mother, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and just it's just so sad that like it keeps on happening month after month, week after week. So this is just the breaking point where we just want change now.
If we're going to be a community, it's not just going to be the black community that makes this happen. This is not black versus white. This is humanity versus racism. This is humanity versus systemic racism. This is love versus hate. We need to understand that this is a time for all of us to come together as people, and we need to change the world that we are in.
The repeated killings of black people in the United States serves as a reminder, an unnecessary reminder, of the violence, the injustice, and systemic inequality black people have had to face in this country in every sphere of their lives. For instance, black people are far more likely than white people to die at the hands of police. They're more likely to become unemployed, be undereducated, and as COVID-19 has laid bare all too clearly, they're far more likely to suffer the burdens of ill health. Rallygoers here today say it's time for many of us, many Americans, to put their biased and well-documented opinions aside, just sit down and listen to what everybody has to say.
Understand that there's a system in place and understand that you perpetrate it. You're part of it. We need to change it, but first just listen to the voices that are crying, listen to the voices that are in pain, listen to the voices that are angered. If we want to change, we need people in power to listen, but we need to understand that it might not come from the president, it might not come from Congress, it has to come from our communities, it has to come from our local state government. We need to change, we need to vote, we need to understand that our voices are heard, but we also just need to listen and listen to each other and listen to what is going on.
I have two younger sisters, one of them's 14 months younger than me, one of them's 6 years younger than me, and I'd never ever want them to feel the way I do. So we need to talk. It's long past the time to talk, and even when we talk, everyone needs to listen. It's no good if we talk and it goes in one ear and out the other. They need to listen and they need to change what's going on.
I do not want to cry anymore. I do not want to fight the same thing over and over again. I want to fight for change. I do not want to dwell on the past. I do not want to dwell on the pain and anger for over 400 years we have been facing. I'm here to reform Arlington Public Schools. I am here to reform the community. But I am here for change because we are tired of seeing young black men and women get shot and killed. We are tired of them having to be isolated and not hearing their voice heard. It is hard. It is hard, but we will not stop fighting. We will keep on going. And I'm very glad that all of you guys are here today to support me.
I'm here because I think we've all just watched this happen like year after year. This is not even close to enough, but like I think it's just reminding people like once you've done this, that's when you just start sending emails to your representatives and calling people and signing petitions and donating. But it's just like a great way to let like the town know and everyone know that like this isn't gonna stop anytime soon.
Among those in the crowd, Congressman Joe Kennedy III, who's challenging Senator Ed Markey for a Senate seat come November. Kennedy's people told ACMi News he just came to quietly observe, but that he was absolutely moved by the speaker's accounts, and it reminded him of why his family joined this fight so long ago.
100 years of delay have passed since President Lincoln freed the slaves, yet their heirs, their grandsons, are not fully free. They are not yet freed from the bonds of injustice. They are not yet freed from social and economic oppression. And this nation, for all its hopes and all its boasts, will not be fully free until all its citizens are free.
So I'm obviously very proud of the contribution my family's made, but I think they would be the first ones to say that obviously our work isn't complete. That 52 years after 1968, one of the most tumultuous years in our history, we are still having the same conversations and still in a quest for healing. And that this has got to take more effort and more engagement and more courage on behalf of everybody, but in particularly white America, to recognize the fact that if we are going to actually address these issues, we have to be far more deliberate and intentional and aggressive about doing so.
A lot of the people here, Black Lives Matter, a lot of the groups are saying, look, you have biased opinions with other races, not African Americans, but you have biased opinions that have lasted for years. They haven't gotten us anywhere. All we want you to do is listen. Why do you think that's so hard for a lot of our society not to get?
Look, I think that's where this starts. It starts with recognizing the fact that the histories, the reality, the lived experience, obviously, that I have. I'm a very privileged white guy. It's going to be different than an experience that other people have. You learn about the Civil War and Reconstruction and Jim Crow and the Civil Rights Movement, but the Fair Labor Standards Act, the GI Bill, the Fair Housing Act, the myriad ways, local zoning laws that we still codify and prevent true lived equality and access to economic and social justice, largely based upon the calcification of racial disparities. And that's got to change.
No peace! No peace! No peace!
After the rally at Town Hall, protesters then made their way to Mill Street and Millbrook Drive.
George Floyd! Whose lives matter? Black lives matter! Whose lives matter? Black lives matter! Whose lives matter? Black lives
Finally ending their 3-hour rally in front of Arlington High School. Banners were then attached to the red construction barrier currently lining the sidewalk along Mass Ave. Then, protesters dispersed peacefully. But the movement and the fight for long overdue solutions endures.
No peace! No peace! No peace! No peace! No peace!
We are confronted primarily with a moral issue. It is as old as the scriptures and is as clear as the American Constitution. The heart of the question is whether all Americans are to be afforded equal rights and equal opportunities, whether we are going to treat our fellow Americans as we want to be treated.
No doubt the coronavirus has put a damper on many July 4th, 2020 celebrations. But the pandemic has also granted us time to really look and to really listen. In many ways, this could be a serendipitous moment in our history, a chance to right so many wrongs in our storied, but very violent, very bloody, and in many cases our extremely unjust past. It'll definitely be an uncomfortable discussion at times, but one we need to have so that maybe, just maybe, something good can come from the countless and unreported tragic events in our history. 2020 has shown us that enough is enough, and that it's time to abide by the words of our Pledge of Allegiance that most of us repeated through the generations before we cracked open our books in the early morning hours in the classroom. Now, if we listen to those words and we actually put them through the paces, we have a chance of truly having freedom and justice, not for some, but freedom and justice for all. I'm Jeff Barnes. Happy Independence Day from all of us at ACMi. Please stay safe. If you can, take care of others. We'll be back here next week, so please join us then. Good night.
You can always check out our latest segments and newscasts on the web at acmi.tv/news. And don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at ACMi News. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. You'll find us at youtube.com/ACMi News. If you have any news tips for us or wish to become a citizen journalist, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at news@acmi.tv or stop by ACMI Studio A at 85 Park Avenue.